I want to welcome people to the first in a four-part webinar series on weight loss and weight management, the current theories and best practices. I'm Douglas Tarrant. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the College of Public Health, University of Arizona, and I'm also the Director of the Western Region Public Health Training Center. I want to give a special welcome to the folks in the Western region for the Public Health Training Center. We serve Arizona, California, Hawaii, Nevada, and the U.S.-affiliated Pacific Islands, and also the Southwest Telehealth Resource Center, which is Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah, who have lots of overlap between our two organizations. There's also HRSA grantees that we like to help recognize who are being funded by, and we also are sure that we have other participants from the U.S. and abroad watching this. This webinar series is being brought to you jointly by our two organizations. The series is going to be, again, a series of 4 webinars, and we will be talking about dynamic energy balance on this first one. Just before we get started, please mute your phone or computer, and please use the Q&A function of WebEx to ask questions. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to access today's webinar and past webinars on our website. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Melinda Menor. Dr. Menor's talk today is titled Rethinking Energy Balance, Applying Science to Practice. Dr. Menor is a professor of nutrition at Oregon State University, where her research focuses on the interactions of nutrition and exercise for energy balance, health, and performance. She has authored over 100 scientific publications, book chapters, and review articles, and 4 nutrition textbooks. She's an active member of the American Society of Nutrition, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and Sports and Cardiovascular Nutritionists, and the American College of Sports Medicine. And she recently served as chair of the USDA, ACSM, and Energy Balance Work Group, an expert panel meeting, Energy Balance at the Crossroads, Translating Science into Action. Currently, she is funded on 2 USDA childhood obesity prevention grants, totaling $10 million, one of which is using sports nutrition to engage high school soccer players to improve health and performance and better understand energy balance. Dr. Menor received her BA from Seattle Pacific University, a MS from the University of Oregon, and her PhD in nutritional sciences with a dual minor in health and exercise sciences from Oregon State University. And she's a registered dietitian. We're really lucky to have her lead this webinar today, and we look forward to your questions at the end. So, Melinda, please start.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Doug, for that nice introduction, and thank you all for attending this webinar. Today, I want to walk through some of the important points I think you need to be able to address with the public regarding energy balance, to help them understand the many factors that determine their body weight and why either weight loss or weight gain can be difficult. So today's focus, I'm going to talk a little bit about static versus dynamic energy balance and what are the differences between those. I'm going to talk about what factors contribute to your weight. And notice I said your weight, and I also mean your client's weight, because I do think we have to sort of personalize this sometimes and understand it for ourselves as we try to interpret for our clients and patients. And I don't think it's too late to learn things, and I'll share some of the things I've learned through my own research. What do you say to your clients about weight and weight loss? And finally, rethinking about how we talk about weight management to other individuals. So you've all seen this. You all are very aware of energy balance, that you're trying to balance diet, what you consume, with what you expend. Your clients are bombarded with this stuff. it's totally amazing to me how much information is on the market, and they don't have any way of sorting fact from fiction. In fact, this morning when I came in, I just got a new flyer for a new book called The Skinny Gut Diet. So there's never-ending host of products on the market, and this is data from 2013 that was reported in 2014. We spend $30 billion on weight loss products and another $30 billion on services. That is a tremendous amount of money that people, in my mind, oftentimes are just throwing away. At the same time, we spend almost $1 million, we spend a little more than $1.5 million on weight loss pills that are absolutely not regulated. So I think it's imperative that we understand what's out there and can guide clients and patients appropriately. So let's talk about static energy balance. This is what you learned in school. This is what you're familiar with, that energy balance is energy in equals energy out, and you are stable. And the problem with this equation and this presentation of the data to patients is that it makes the assumption that if I just change your diet and tell you to eat less, it has no impact on the other side of the equation, which isn't true. And this equation works very well if you are weight stable, but I'm assuming most of you are in this webinar because you would like to know how to help clients who either want to gain or lose weight. So what we want to talk about is dynamic energy balance. And the way this is different is that dynamic energy balance assumes there are numerous biological and behavioral factors that regulate and influence both sides of the equation. Thus, if I change diet without saying to the patient to do anything about physical activity or energy expenditure, I can and do influence the other side of the equation. The question is, how do I know what's happening and how do I monitor this? So let's talk about what contributes to your current weight, what contributes to your client's current weight. And I'm going to go through two slides that come out of this article by Galligan and Ravison, International Journal of Obesity in 2008. It's one of my favorite articles that really tries to get at the complexity of why we are the size we are. And if you first start on the right-hand side of that slide, you'll see two squares. One says genetics and one says early life events and epigenetics. We can't discard that people are coming to us with a whole set of characteristics that we cannot change. They are already there, and they may predispose someone to how they respond to diet and physical activity. So I'll just use myself as an example. I'm 5 foot tall. There's nothing you're going to be able to do to change my height, even though I've tried many times. Also, my epigenetic, I bring with me that genetic predisposition for a certain body size, and also those early life events. Then if you look in the center of that slide, you will see energy intake and energy expenditure. And you can see that we have the brain or the hypothalamus there. And so we realize that the brain, the hypothalamus, is what is trying to regulate energy balance in our bodies. So when I eat food, I have gut hormones that send signals back to my brain that says that I've consumed a certain amount of food. It also talks to the liver, the fat cells, the muscles. When I expend energy, I am also sending out signals that I am using particular substrates, and the organs of the body are trying to balance all of that. And we're designed to maintain a sort of energy balance where we eat when we're hungry and we stop when we're full. The problem has been what's happening at the top of the slide, is that environment and lifestyle can override those signals from the brain. And we all know that we have sat down to a table and we have been full, and then somebody says, do you want dessert? And we, of course, say yes. And yet you know you're already full. You know you don't need to eat anymore. Those signals have already gotten to your brain. So we know that stress and mood and all sorts of things can influence and override the biological part of what's regulating energy balance. Then if we go to the next slide, I want to talk just a little bit about what happens when people overeat. and I'm going to walk through this relatively quickly, but if you just think that someone's consuming 2,500 calories a day, and you look at the oxidation, the daily oxidation as a percent of stores, you can see that we don't have that many calories in carbohydrates stored as glycogen in our body, but we consume a fair amount of our carbohydrate that we have stored every single day. We turn that over. And if you're active, you turn even more of it over. You can see protein. We burn relatively small amounts of protein if we're in energy balance. And we even burn less of our stored fat. We just use up basically what we have consumed. When individuals overconsume or overfeed, and here I made sure that when we showed the overfeeding that when you overeat, you typically eat all the macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrate. But if you look, what happens is that the body's saying, whoa, it's very expensive to convert carbohydrate to fat, and so I'm going to try and burn as much of that extra carbohydrate you ate as possible. It might burn a little bit more fat, or protein, but it burns very little of that extra fat you've consumed and stores most of it because it's economically easier to do that. And then thus we expand our total body size. Now, what I did is I sort of took that information and I want to just give you some examples of what do I mean that energy intake can't, if I change energy intake, I can actually change energy expenditure. First example, you restrict your calories to 1,000 calories a day. In 2 days, your metabolic rate's going to be lower. You didn't intend to lower your metabolic rate, but it went down. If you continue on that diet and you lose a lot of lean tissue, it will even go down lower. Another example might be the types of foods that you consume. Example, research study that was done, they fed individuals processed cheese on white bread, made a grilled cheese sandwich. They fed it. They looked at the thermic effect of food, meaning how much energy did it take to digest that food. The second trial, they gave them whole wheat bread with Oregon Tillamook cheese, catch the Oregon part there, and they found out that it took more energy to digest that food. The same is true in terms of the types of foods, whether it's low or high energy density can impact satiety, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that. So those are just some examples. If I move to the energy expenditure side, I know that depending on the physical activity that I do, I burn different substrates. I know that if my body composition changes, I burn different kinds of substrates, and I actually, if I lose lean tissue, I actually have less need for energy. There's lots of emerging data now looking at the impact of exercise on appetite. And it's pretty amazing that people who exercise may have a couple things going for why they can maintain their weight. They are physically active, which does burn calories, but it changes appetite. And so you actually may blunt your appetite and your energy intake is less, which then helps you maintain that body size. Now, I just put this in here because I really think you have to appreciate the impact of hunger on what people do. It says late at night, his own stomach with Gordon Foyle's attempt at dieting. People don't stay on diets because people get hungry or people see very appealing food or they see their favorite foods and they're going to eat it. So how do we help people actually learn to like foods that are healthier and also feel satisfied when they're on a diet so they're trying to restrict calories so they can stay on the diet? So what do you say to your clients about diet or their weight? And I just put up a few things here. There's always lots of excuses of why you don't exercise. What fits your busy schedule better, exercising an hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? Or go on the computer diet. You can snack as much as you want. How many diets have you seen? Is you just go on this diet, you can eat as much as you want and you'll still lose weight. So I want to talk about the 3,500 calorie rule. You will see a host of clients and patients in your office, all the way from people who want to lose weight, they want to get more fit, they do it for health. You may see people who have fitness or performance individuals, and it doesn't matter who I interact with. people always seem to be unhappy with their body size, and they want to gain or they want to lose. So you're going to see people across the board. And the question is, do you treat those people the same? Do you give the same recommendation to this person in the middle who is maybe more fit but still may need to lose a little weight or wants to maintain their weight to the person who really isn't overweight and needs to lose weight? So the first question is, the classic 3,500 calories equals a pound of body weight. And you do the numbers, you subtract 500 calories a day from your diet, and you should lose a pound a week. Now the question is, where did these numbers come from? Now, I can't see your faces, and if you're really smart, you'll say, well, from those references at the bottom, which is really true. But those really came from from obese subjects that were monitored in a hospital setting, and it was just an estimate of, well, we only fed them 500 calories a day for so many days, and this is how much weight they lost. What happened is somehow those estimates became some sort of a rule. I think that where most of us think it came from is from these numbers, is that if you look at a pound of body fat, fat is mostly fat, not that much water, and you do the rough calculations, it comes out to about 3,500 calories. But if you look at lean tissue, which is mostly water, there aren't that many calories stored in a pound of lean tissue. And so when people lose weight, we don't know what's being lost. Or if they're gaining weight, we don't know what's being gained. And the bathroom scale can't tell you how much water and glycogen and protein you lost. We always just make the assumption that most of it is fat, and that may not necessarily be true. Now, the next question is, look at these individuals on this slide. If all those individuals showed up in your office, would you treat them the same? And they want to lose weight, would you treat them the same? You have women who are relatively lean and fit, yet I can tell you they'll come to you for weight loss. On the bottom right-hand side is really supposed to depict a football player who could be relatively fit but still have metabolic syndrome and is overweight and is not healthy. And then you have someone who might be very sedentary and have abdominal obesity. How do those people respond to a weight loss program, and how do you treat them? This is my most classic example of why the 3,500 calorie rule doesn't apply. Let's assume I eat 100 extra calories a day. And this is what we teach dietitians, we say in our textbooks, and I do it for 40 years. If I just do the numbers, I'm consuming about 1.5 million calories in those 40 years. If I divide that out, I should gain about 417 pounds. Now, Doug knows me, and he's saying, well, probably I would be 4 times bigger than I am right now if I did this. So everybody will say, no, that's not going to happen. Why doesn't that happen? You just told me 3,500 calories equals a pound of body weight. In essence, what happens is that I am going to gain weight. I am going to gain weight to the point, and it might be 5 pounds, it might be 10 pounds, depending on how big you are to begin with, until I reach a point where my body is big enough that it needs that extra 100 calories a day to maintain my new weight. And once I reach that, I will plateau, and now I might be 5 or 6 pounds heavier than I was before. Now, it's easy to say, well, then just cut those 100 calories out, and you'll get right back to the size you were before. It's not always that easy. Some people it does, that you can cut the calories out and they'll go right back, but other people, it seems like their body wants to defend now that higher body weight, and it's more difficult for them. So I want to walk you through a couple studies that I think are demonstrate this point of the caloric requirement in weight loss and also the importance of physical activity. So this research was done at Pennington Biomedical Research Center, which is one of our premier obesity research center in the country. And they asked 2 questions. Does weight loss follow the 3,500 calorie rule? Now, I'm sure most of you are saying, my goodness, we had to wait until 2012 to ask this question. We didn't know this before. And the second question is, does the energy content of weight loss change over time? And so they did this study, and they used overweight sedentary men and women I'm only going to talk about the 25% calorically restricted group. So they took these individuals and they restricted their calories by 25% of what they typically do. And I'll give you a little bit more details of that in a minute. And then what they did is they calculated the change in energy content of weight change. So they calculated what kind of caloric deficit and then how did weight change. And they asked them not to alter their physical activity. This is a very well metabolically controlled study. And this is what they found. At the beginning of the diet, 5 weeks, 2,200 calories were required for a change in a pound of body weight. In the middle of the diet, and this was a 6-month intervention, it was about 2,700 calories. And by the time they'd been on the diet for 6 months, it was about 3,500 calories, or Frischnikoff's rule, the one we're familiar with. So the energy content of a pound of weight can change over time. One of the reasons why people may see more rapid weight loss at the beginning than the end. And the change in energy content of weight loss means that you're losing other things besides fat. You're losing water, you're losing lean tissue, you're losing fat-free mass. And by the end of that diet, it looks like they probably were losing a lot more fat and less lean tissue and water. Because every time you lose lean tissue, you lose a tremendous amount of water. You lose all the water that was in that muscle tissue. The other thing that individuals are always interested in is what about the protein loss during dieting? And they also looked at that. At the beginning, and this is men and women separated, that it was about 0.5 kilo by week 5 they were losing of lean tissue per week. And if you look at the end of the diet, it had definitely sloped off, and they were losing a lot less lean tissue and a lot more body fat. The reason this is important is they didn't change the composition of the diet. People were staying on the same type of diet. But we know lots of people who don't make it to 6 months on a diet. We're lucky if they make it to 5 weeks. And then if they keep repeating that, what's happening to their lean tissue? And if they don't do any physical activity as they gain that the fat back or the weight back, they may not recover all the lean tissue that they lost. So, knowing how many diets your clients have been on and the frustrations they've seen, and really trying not to go down that road again, I think is very important. So the next point that I want to talk about is weight loss. What can we do about it? What about diet and exercise interventions? What do we recommend? And on this slide, it says diet plus exercise versus diet alone. That's what I'm going to spend my time talking about. I just want to just briefly mention the other 3 items and tell you a little bit about them. Do people lose weight differently? Do men and women lose weight differently? There is still a controversy in the literature whether that's true. And you'll see some studies that say absolutely not, even meta-analysis, they lose it about the same. I think there's so much variability in men and women who come to your office, and it depends on how big they are, what kind of lean tissue they have, and also how many diets they've been on, that I think it's really hard to say in general men are different than women. How about lean and fat? Makes a huge difference in that a lean individual loses lean tissue very fast. So you have more flexibility when you have an obese individual versus someone who is really much more closer to their healthy body weight. So if you have an overweight person or someone who's normal weight, or oftentimes I see individuals who are lean who still want to lose weight, then you have to be extremely careful caloric restriction isn't too dramatic. And then how about activity? This is something I spend a lot of my time doing, talking about nutrition and physical activity, and you cannot restrict the calories too much if you are asking people also to be active. And I might talk a little bit more about that if there's time at the end. So now we're going to go back, in essence, to the same study that I showed you earlier, and you're going to get a few more details. This study was also done at Pennington Biomedical Institute, and Eric Gravison was the lead researcher on it. Here are a few more details that about that study. Men and women, middle-aged, moderately overweight, not obese, did less than 2 days per week of physical activity. And when I say it was very well done, this is how they did the study. For the first 14 days, they did doubly labeled water to estimate their total energy expenditure. Then in weeks 1 through 12, they put them on one of those 4 diets that are listed below on the bullets. I'm only going to talk about the first 2, but in essence, they fed them all the calories that they needed to be on their particular diet. So if it was a 25% caloric restriction, then they fed them 25% calories less than their doubly labeled water showed for total energy expenditure. The other group that I want to talk about is the calorically restricted, where they said, we're going to reduce energy deficit by 25%, but we're going to take half of it from diet, and we're going to take half of it from exercise. And we're going to exercise people 40 to 45 minutes a day with heart rate monitors. And so then in the middle of the diet, people were given diet prescription, go home and eat this, and they brought them back into the lab, fed them all the food between weeks 22 and 24. And they fed the same composition of the diet in terms of it's sort of a typical American diet, around 30% fat, 15% protein, and 55% carbohydrate. You'll see some of the data from the other groups, but I'm going to focus mostly on the 2 groups that had the 25% energy deficit, just that one of them used exercise and one of them didn't. It was 6 months long. They looked at their body composition with DEXA at baseline, 3 months, and 6 months. Okay, so let's see what happened in terms of their weight loss. Now, I don't have a pointer, but I've put in blue the 2 studies that I'm looking at, the 2 that had the 25% decrease in energy deficit. You can see that weight loss was about the same. Fat-free mass loss was a little bit higher in the calorically restricted group, but it wasn't significantly different. So, I mean, we know this. We know that you can lose weight on either type of diet. People always just say, well, why exercise? It takes so much exercise just to burn 300 calories, which I can eat in a minute if I eat a big cookie. If you look at, and they lost about 10% of their body weight on those 2 diets. The point that I want to make next is what happens when the diet is over. Now look at the far left-hand axis where it says what the units are. It's total daily energy expenditure adjusted for sleep metabolic rate. When you lose weight, your body gets smaller. When your body is smaller, you need fewer calories, and in essence, your sleep or your metabolic rate is going to decrease. So what they wanted to do was adjust for that. And then what they did is they looked at how many calories did you need from baseline in terms of energy expenditure for the calorically restricted plus exercise, and then the calorically only restricted group. So for the calorically restricted plus exercise group, when they looked at their adjusted metabolic rate, it was actually higher than they predicted that it would be. It was the average was 129 calories more. When they looked at the calorically restricted only, it was 240 calories less a day that they needed. In essence, they're going to end this diet, and if they came to see me and I didn't do any actual measurements of metabolic rate, I just looked at their body size and I said, you're going to need about this many calories to maintain your weight. It was actually 240 calories less. They got more metabolically efficient compared to the diet and exercise group that actually went up. And so if you look at the black box, the calorically restricted group decreased their sedentary energy expenditure, and it was 6% lower than the change expected based on the loss of metabolically active tissue, because they're going to lose some lean tissue when you lose weight. This metabolic adaptation only occurred in the diet-only group and not the diet plus exercise group. The other thing that I think, the other reason why exercise is so important, not only for all the metabolic effects and reducing chronic disease, but just helping people manage in our daily environment that has food everywhere, is that if you do exercise, you just get to eat more calories. If you ask someone to stay on a 1,500 or 1,800 or 2,000 calorie diet, most people absolutely cannot manage that. Even I'm a relatively small person, and I wouldn't be able to manage it. And if you look at how many calories you need to get in your diet just to get the micronutrient requirements and your protein requirements, you need around a minimum of 18 to 2,000 calories a day, and that's picking very, very good foods. You don't get any extra cookies in that process. So what I'm going to do now is quickly just go through an example with you. And this is really based on a research study that we have finished not too long ago. Our study was with overweight women, premenopausal, with the idea they had abdominal obesity, and we wanted to see, can we intervene early before these women go through menopause and get them at a healthier weight and reduce their risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome by helping them learn about diet and exercise. So the plan I'm putting on the screen here is the plan that we used. I'm just using Jack instead of Jill because I didn't have any pictures of Jill, so I'm using Jack. So if you look on the right-hand side, this is Jack now. He's overweight, and this is what he dreams about being, thin. And this is what we did in our study, and then I'll show you some of our outcomes. Basically, let's assume Jack's about 3,000 calories a day. He's sedentary. I'm going to put him on a diet and exercise program that reduces energy intake by 300 calories and it increases energy expenditure. And most people will say, if they are willing at all to move and be active, it's easier to reduce my diet by 300 calories instead of 600. And so doing a combination might be easier for me to manage. But I put Jack on an exercise program that's supposed to expend 300 calories a day. If I do the calculation, he should lose a little bit more than a pound a week. But now let's really talk about what happens when the diet starts. I reduced his diet by 300 calories. What was the composition of those calories? Was it a combination of protein, fat, and carbohydrate? Was it all carbohydrate? How you change that diet matters in terms of energy expenditure. Protein has a much higher thermic effect of food than carbohydrate and fat. So I could alter the energy expenditure side just by altering the diet. Now, if it was really calorically restricted, I could also reduce resting metabolic rate. But let's hope I didn't do that because I'm asking him to diet. Does he get more energy efficient? Does he decrease his daily activities of daily life? Let me give you an example. People who go out, who've never been active, they're in a weight loss program, they're sedentary, you ask them to start some sort of a fitness program. It's so easy to say, hey, I don't need to do anything else during the day because I already did my exercise. So do they actually become more sedentary the rest of the day? How are you managing all those roaring hormones that say to the individual, I am hungry and I want to eat? What about the psychological and behavioral factors? Did anything change? Is there any support at home? Are they driving by the same fast food restaurant that they always stop at for their breakfast burrito or whatever? Is there anything that you've changed that have helped manage those things? And then the hunger, and if the hunger and the exercise, they'll say, well, I'm too tired. Remember, the brain is regulating all of this, and those gut hormones are saying, I am tired, I'm fatigued, I'm hungry. I'm going to go off this diet. And I'm asking him to continue to exercise. Now, what kind of exercise did I do? Did I ask them just to walk? Did I ask them to do high-intensity exercise? I can tell you from experience, one of the studies, we just got these overweight postmenopausal women, and we said, we're just going to have them walk, and we're going to walk with them. I didn't know anyone could walk this so slow. I mean, I am out there waving them forward. And then the second we were out there 20 minutes, they said, well, Dr. Minower, we need to go back. And I said, where's the rule that we only exercise for 20 minutes? So I think they have to really understand people come at physical activity differently. And then you have all those hormones, as I already mentioned. So in reality, even though I said I had a 600-calorie deficit, I really don't know what my deficit is. And the closer Jack gets to what we've put as his target weight, the smaller the deficit's going to become if I don't make some changes on either side of the equation. And so weight loss will start to slow, and they will say, I'm doing exactly what I did before. Why am I not losing as much weight? This is the results from the study that we did in our premenopausal, overweight, abdominally obese women. And we actually had two different interventions. One was 15% of their diet was from protein, and the other one, 25%. There were no differences in our groups in terms of weight loss, but I want to focus first on the body mass, which is in sort of the mustard color. These were people we monitored extremely closely. We exercised with them 3 times a day with heart rate monitors. They exercised 3 times a week with heart rate monitors and twice a week on their own. We saw them at least 5 times a week. We knew who was doing what we asked them to do. They kept the logs. They had these little log books that they kept every single day for 16 weeks. Dramatic difference. You can imagine that some of these people were happier with their outcomes than others. We also looked at trunk fat, and you can see the variability there. So I think you have to appreciate that people respond differently. Also, you can see that we set some goals, but our actual goals, what we actually calculated people did, were different than what we had set. Some people wanted to restrict calories more than we wanted them to. And in fact, some people did it way more dramatically than we asked, and they are not part of these data because they didn't follow what we asked them to do. And then these are busy moms. They're premenopausal. They found it difficult to start an exercise program, but I think many of them I still see today, and they've been very successful. So what do I recommend? Weight loss and management. Is there a better way to help our clients? And I'm going to talk about, in the last few minutes I have, 2 things that you might think about doing. First one is, how do we predict weight change? Obviously, that 3,500 calorie rule doesn't really work. And so what do we do? Well, there are 2 weight simulators out there now. One's been developed by NIH and one's been developed by Pennington, and I've given you the websites and I've given you the references. These 2 weight simulators are trying to do the dramatic energy balance. They are trying to estimate as body weight changes what the actual weight change will be, and so people can get a more realistic idea of what will actually happen. I am only going to talk about the first one just briefly and show you what it might look like if you used it, but I really highly recommend you go on and look at it. This data was published in Lancet in 2001, so you have the reference there, and the website is also listed here, and I'm only going to highlight a few of the comments in the abstract of the article. Obesity interventions can result in weight loss, but accurate predictions of body weight time course requires properly accounting for dynamic energy balance. So there's a lot of research behind doing mathematical modeling of how do people lose weight and how are people different in that weight loss. Then the next underlined says we show that body weight response to a change in energy intake is slow with half times of about a year. Furthermore, adults with greater adiposity have a larger expected weight loss for the same change in energy intake. So it really, how much you're changing really may depend on what your body size is to begin with. Now I'm just going to run you through a quick example, and I just picked this example because it was easy because I had this athlete show up in my office. He's a fit crew member. However, he wanted to lose about 10 pounds. Ideally, he would have liked to have lost 20 pounds. But guess what? He shows up in my office 40 days before he wants his weight loss and says, help. He seems to gain weight easily based on his history. He doesn't like to cook, and he doesn't like it that all the rest of his crew members are lean and can eat anything they want, but he can't. So I just took his data and I put it into this weight loss simulator. I didn't do anything with his physical activity because he's already very active, but I'll show you how the simulator can change this. So you log in, and you have two ways of doing this. You can set a weight goal. As you can see, the top tab says set a weight goal, or you can set a lifestyle change. A lifestyle change is I want to eat 300 calories less a day, and I want to exercise 300 calories worth of physical activity. You put in their weight, their height, their age. You estimate their physical activity. I used the highest level here because this particular athlete is that active, but you would probably use for sedentary individuals probably the very lowest rate as you get them moving. Then you can put in what caloric restriction you want to put in, and then what it does is it estimates and tracks your weight loss. So you can actually see what's realistic. Now, I've used this simulator enough that I know that it's not set up for the individual, the kind of individual I put in here, because it was based on interventions with obese and overweight individuals. And so his lean body mass is higher than what is estimated in the simulator. Also, because he is an athlete, we made the decision he wouldn't restrict calories on high training or competition days. And also remember, the weight loss may be different because people don't necessarily adhere to what they're supposed to do. Maybe they do it 2/3 of the time and not 100% of the time. So I would say go to these weight loss simulators and play around with them and see if you can't help your clients get a more realistic expectation of what may happen if they make some lifestyle changes. And the other thing you have to do is ask them, what are they willing to do? You can't tell them. They have to tell you, yes, I'm willing, I think I could make a particular change. The other part I want to talk about is the type of diet change to make. And in the last few studies that I've done, and we're quickly running out of time, so I'm going to move through these next couple of slides, is work that's been based on Dr. Barbara Rolls, who's a distinguished professor at Penn State, and she has basically looked at the impact of low energy dense diets on weight. And we actually use this weight loss approach with our premenopausal abdominally obese women. And this is where I can say, I think as a nutritionist, I have a pretty good diet, but based on that study, I even changed my own diet to try and eat more like I'm going to show you. So what do we mean by a low energy dense diet? It's the calories per gram of food. And so you're asking people to eat really a healthy diet, more whole foods, vegetables, fiber, low-fat dairy and meat, and in essence, eat the grapes instead of the raisins. The characteristics of this food, it's high in water. That takes a lot of volume in your stomach, and it's high in fiber. And based on Barbara Rolls' work, it can be very satiating. People can say, I am full, I don't want to eat anymore. It's the same concept of just how many oranges can you eat versus how much orange juice can you drink. And in essence, her work shows that low energy dense diets can result in greater weight loss and a reduction in calories with no reduction in portion size. Americans like to eat a lot. So what we have to do is give them a volume of food that satisfies them, but the calories are low. this is just, and you have a reference for this, so I'm not going to spend time, but you can see how food sort of fall into low, very low, low, medium, and high categories in terms of their energy density. And we're just asking people to eat more at the very low and low end and add those medium and high things in with more moderation. So I'm going to quickly show you a study that she did in the last few minutes just to demonstrate the difference. She took women and she put them on 4 different diets, and they're listed there. One was the standard or control diet, 100% energy density and 100% portion size. Then she either reduced portion size or energy density or both, and this was the outcome. Oh, let me back up. How did she do it? Basically, she replaced potato chips with vegetables. She used low-fat instead of high-fat dips. And any dish like pasta that she made, she tried to make it lower in fat and added lots and lots of vegetables. You just add vegetables wherever you can. Okay. I think something's happened because I don't have a slide anymore. I'm doing page down and it seems to be changing slides, but it doesn't give me a slide.
We see variations in cereal volume.
Okay, so I don't have those. I mean, they're not showing up on my screen. So let me just thank you. Let me just quickly go to that slide. And I'm going to back up a slide. So I think I'm going to take you back to slide 38. I can't see this slide, but I think you can. And it basically says that when they lowered energy density, they lowered caloric intake by about 25% versus what happens when they lowered portion size. So I'm just going to, I can move the slide. So if you look at the results, when they lowered energy density, it was about 575 calories. When they lowered portion size, it was 231 calories. And what they found out is that you can have a synergistic effect. If you do both, you get a greater reduction in calories, which I think that's what people are looking for. All right, I'm trying to change the slides without seeing the slides. Sorry, this isn't going as smoothly as I hope, but okay. So there's one last study that she just published, and I think that this is kind of fascinating, and then I will quickly close, is that she did it with cereal. She took cereal and she took something like a Wheaties, and she made the flakes smaller and smaller and smaller, but what she did is she had people self-serve themselves, and what they found out is that as the cereal flakes got smaller, people served themselves more and they ate more calories, even though they reported that they didn't feel like they were eating any different amount. So I think that that lowering your energy density has a real impact in terms of making you feel full and satisfied, and you can actually consume lower calories. So I'm out of time. My last few slides, and do you have a slide that says exercise and physical activity up?
No, we have the cereal slide up.
The cereal slide up, okay. So, sorry, so now do you have
yes.
exercise and diet slide, or exercise and physical activity? I'm going to skip a few slides because I'm a true believer in physical activity, but you're going to have a presentation on that. And I am going to go to the last slide, and I have to say this slide should say surviving our obesogenic environment. Is that correct?
Yes.
I used to tell people just stop eating when you're full and you'll do fine, but I think that's so hard in our environment now. So I think it is difficult to maintain weight in the current environment, and so I think it's important for you to help your clients identify and manipulate what they can and then understand what they can't change, identify a weight that's healthy and allows people to be physically active but also realistic, because I think sometimes people come up with the strangest weights that they want to be at. And finally, remembering your diet and physical activity is the sum total of the small everyday choices that you make. Thank you. And sorry about the little glitch at the end.
Thank you, Melinda. It was really helpful. I love the breadth of the discussion that you provided. We do have a few questions. And the first question has to do with the high sugar content of the Western diet. And what is your perspective on how the sugar intake in America and the West leads to obesity, given that it might lead to high energy dense food?
I do think our Western society has a sugar fat tooth. And one of the classic things, and this is true if you follow the low energy dense diet, you eliminate sweetened beverages. I think that is one of the simplest and easiest things to do, and it is something that we do ask our clients to do, eliminate sweetened beverages. So don't drink your calories is the basic bottom line. I think we have to learn how to modify those high sugar foods that we do consume. I think from a clinician and a practical aspect, you can't tell most people eliminate all the sugar from their diet, because I don't know that that's realistic. And if you say that, then they will just turn you off. But I certainly think that we can all figure out how to monitor it, make certain choices about when we're going to have dessert or how we add sugar to our diet. And then also remember that our serving sizes, if you order most desserts out, you get enough for 3 people. And so you're just going to have to figure out how to do that. And then if there's time, I'll tell you foods that hum and foods that beckon, but I'll do that at the end, Doug.
So another question is, what do you do for people that eat very little but still do not lose weight?
And, that's a really good question. And what you do is you ask them to eat more. I think what you have to do is a couple things. I mean, if they really aren't, you can't eat 500 calories a day and not lose weight, but they can be fairly restrictive in their diet and not be losing weight because they've suppressed their metabolic rate so much. At the same time, I don't know what's happened to their lean tissue. And so in essence, you get people just for a few weeks or maybe a month, let's just eat a normal amount of food. What might be normal for you? If you can, it is great if you can look at metabolic rate. I have to say, we did a study one time, and I kept telling the students, you measured that metabolic rate wrong. That woman could not have a metabolic rate that low. And what we found out after 3 times, it was really low, and the calories she was eating would be about appropriate to maintain her weight. It was about 300 calories less than we anticipated. So I think that you really have to sort of kickstart people's metabolism, and as you're asking them to eat more calories, you might really look, I didn't talk about it, but you got to look at the protein content of the diet. When you restrict calories, you need to get protein content higher. You can't let it drop so low. So that's the other thing that we do. And protein has a higher thermic effect of food.
Okay. Another question is, can you quickly summarize again which is better and why? Is it diet restriction only or diet and exercise?
You've got to do diet and exercise, and these are the reasons. One is exercise does burn calories, so you don't have to restrict calories as much. People find it harder to do that. Number 2, if you can get your individuals to move a bit more, exercise can actually help blunt appetite so they don't feel as hungry. Exercise itself burns calories. And third, almost last, exercise can help maintain that lean tissue. And finally, it is well documented that if people are going to maintain weight, exercise helps people do that. There's just so many health benefits of being more fit. on top of just weight.
So going back to, you mentioned something about overeating, and you said that when one overeats, you burn carbohydrates first, and then you usually just absorb the fat and things of that sort. What happens if you overeat on a low carbohydrate diet?
Okay, so let's say you don't have many carbohydrates. So that, first of all, you're going to eventually become glycogen depleted. And if you overeat two other things. You overeat fat and you overeat protein. The body can easily store the fat that's in butter or a piece of meat or French fries or whatever is easily converted. It only takes about 3% of the energy to convert it from the food fat to body fat. Protein takes a lot more energy, actually about 25 to 35% of the calories to convert the protein to body fat. So you still can do it. The problem I have, and the data says you lose weight on both of them. You might lose a little more on the low carbohydrate because you lose so much water, but it's almost impossible to ask people to exercise very much if you don't feed them any carbohydrate because they don't have any glycogen. And if you're dealing with overweight people who don't want to exercise to begin with, then you've got a double whammy.
So the next question is, what's your opinion on eating frequency? Is 3 meals spread out better than 5 to 6 hours apart, or is it better to have 5 or 6 small meals and snacks throughout the day?
There's been research on that, and in terms of body weight, it doesn't really seem to matter, even though people want to argue one side or the other. I think a couple things related to snacking. If you're going to snack, then pick those high water, high fiber foods and get in the habit. And that's what I ended up doing. I'm someone who could eat more grain and bread than anybody, but I've really tried to work it. If I'm going to snack on fruits and vegetables that are whole. So I think it really depends on the individual. And if you're active, you may need to have a little bit of a snack just to keep your energy level up so you can go out and do physical activity. So I think it really depends on your own sort of preference and lifestyle. But total energy intake does matter. And snacking late at night is where so many people put on those extra calories that they don't need because they're really not hungry. They just can't stay out of the kitchen.
So here's the last question. What do you consider a high versus a low protein diet? And what amount of protein do you recommend for weight loss?
Okay. If you recall, I had a slide up that said 15 versus 25% of calories from protein. 15% or about 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram is the RDA. It's what people typically eat. A higher amount of protein, we took our subjects up to 25%. For some of those people, it was really hard to eat that much protein, and the recommendations are probably you want to get people at least to about 1.5 to 1.7. This is what we recommend for active individuals to consume, grams of protein per kilogram body weight. Now, with active individuals, we never really have any trouble doing that because they are eating so many calories. But when you're restricting individuals, then you have to make sure that the protein that they're eating is lower in fat. And so using low-fat dairy, using lean meats, something like eggs that are pretty lean, the fat is in the egg yolk, is probably what you want to do. And remember that grains also have protein in them, whole grains especially, and beans.
Okay. Thank you. We have a few other questions of which we will email to Melinda and then probably post someplace. And the other thing is I want to just thank Melinda at this point for her webinar and to tell you all that our next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, July 14th at the same time. It's going to be about physical activity prescriptions for overweight patients. This is going to be presented by Dr. Deborah Horn. She's the medical director and assistant professor at the Center for Obesity Medicine and Metabolic Health Performance at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center. She's also the president-elect of the American Society of Bariatric Physicians. And before that, she was at the Duke University Medical Center. And we'll be sending you out announcements a month in advance of the July 14th webinar. And that will be our second in the series. And I want to thank everyone for participating. And as usual, we value your opinion. Please take a few minutes and complete the online survey, which you will see here, when you log off. And it's our Survey Monkey, and this will help us make sure that we have the right programs for you in the future. And it will also be greatly appreciated by our funders at HRSA who would like to get feedback on how their federal funds are being spent. Thank you very much.